Welcome to A Century of Cinema. Today I will be exploring my favourite films of 1939. 1939 was hailed as Hollywood's greatest year, with giants like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, which are now firmly cemented as genuinely iconic films. I felt the need to mention them specifically because neither is actually on my list of favourite films of 1939. It's not that I don't like them. In fact, if I was going as far as top 10, they would very likely be there. There are just others I like more for various reasons. Such as my first selection, Garson Kanan's Bachelor Mother, starring Ginger Rogers and David Niven. Rogers plays Polly Parrish, a girl who gets fired from a department store owned by the father of Niven's Playboy character, David Merlin. While looking for a new job, she sees a baby dropped off on the doorstep of a foundling home and is mistaken for its mother. She insists otherwise and leaves, but the people at the home find out she works at Merlin's and get David to rehire her so she can take care of the baby. When the baby is dropped off to her and she finds out what has happened, she takes the baby to David's house, who promptly returns it to her, even though Polly keeps insisting that she's not the mother. David begins to try and help Polly with the baby, and soon they begin to fall for each other, just as Polly is beginning to get attached to the baby, which she's now apparently stuck with. Soon, a misunderstanding leads to David's father believing David is actually the father of the child. Bachelor Mother is a warm, witty, romantic comedy written by Norman Krasner based on a 1935 Austrian-Hungarian film called Little Mother. Unlike many plots driven by misunderstanding, it doesn't get too bogged down by it. I didn't feel much exasperation at the characters for their lack of communication. Much of it seemed to actually ring true. I think this is due in large part to the characters of David and Polly and their note-perfect portrayals. You get how it all happened. Rogers' Polly is just a gal who wants her job back, thrust into an extraordinary situation, and Niven's David is a flighty, somewhat naive rich kid, only just learning how the other half lives. And he's beginning to grow into a more responsible adult. And watching the evolution of their romance is quite simply a delight. Their scenes together are the high points of the movie, particularly their New Year's Eve date, where Polly, anxious about hanging out with David's rich crowd, is rescued from them by David, who insists Polly is Swedish and doesn't speak English, only breaking character to a jealous admirer of David's as they leave.
Well, how'd you like her?
She's not bad for a fill-in. Personally, I'd just as soon go stag.
You could, too, with those shoulders.
A great script full of laughs and heart, pick Ginger Rogers, an up-and-coming David Niven, and a director who really knows his stuff come together to create one of the most successful and, in my opinion, best comedies of the era. Goodbye, Mr. Chips, directed by Sam Wood and based on James Hilton's novella, stars Robert Donat as Mr. Chipping, a schoolmaster at Brookfield Boys' School. The film follows Chipping through his entire career as an educator, from his inexperienced youth in 1870 to his eventual death a good 58 years later. It begins with Chipping near the end of his life, reflecting on his time at Brookfield. It is represented by certain periods, beginning with his first few years, learning the ropes. Then, approaching middle age and disappointed by his lack of career advancement, he is egged on by his friend Max, the German teacher, played by Paul Henreid, to take a holiday in Austria where he meets Catherine, Greer Garson's beautiful film debut, who brings him out of his shell and makes him a better man and teacher. After her tragic loss, Chipping's life becomes entirely about his students. He then retires but is called back to become headmaster when World War I breaks out, due to so many teachers serving in the army. When he retires again, he remains an institution at Brookfield, and while he may not officially teach anymore, he still devotes himself to the boys who pass through the school, right up until the day he dies, peacefully in his bed, remembering a life well lived. Robert Donat masterfully anchors this film as Chipping, affectionately known as Chips to practically everyone. He seamlessly transitions through the stages of a man's life, from youth to old age, with some help from very good makeup, but it is the performance that sells it. And though the film is pretty much entirely on his shoulders, he also has some excellent backup, like Paul Henreid, credited as Paul von Herrenried here, presumably because his full name, Paul Georg Julius Freiherr von Herrenried Ritter von Basel-Waldingau, was too much of a mouthful, and I can attest to that. When his character Max Stafel appears, it injects a boost of vitality into the film and sets Chips on his path toward Catherine. Enter Greer Garson. There are not too many more endearing debut performances in existence. She is an absolute beacon of light in this film, just as her Catherine is to Chips. But of course, Robert Donat's Oscar-winning tour de force is the soul of Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Up next is the first of two films on this list, directed by Edmund Golding, with a Casey Robinson screenplay and starring Bette Davis, Dark Victory. Bette Davis plays headstrong socialite Judith Traherne, who comes down with a mysterious fatal illness. She is diagnosed and treated by Dr. Frederick Steele, played by George Brent. Steele performs brain surgery on Judith, but only succeeds in prolonging her life a bit and allowing her to live normally until very near the end, when her eyesight will fail a few hours before her death. Steele decides not to tell Judith what's going to happen, thereby allowing her a normal life until the end comes. Steele and Judith then fall for each other, and after a falling out when Judith discovers the truth, reconcile, get married, and move to Vermont, where Steele devotes himself to curing Judith. Tragically, to no avail. Bette Davis has gone on record to state that Dark Victory was her favourite of all of her films, and her wonderful performance deservedly garnered her another in a string of Oscar nominations. And this is also one of stalwart George Brent's finest performances. He and Bette appeared in 11 films together from 1932 to 1942, and Bette named him as her favourite co-star. It's easy to see why, too. He so completely complements her. She is generally fiery and bigger than life, while he is almost always understated and a calming influence. His style, unlike many actors of the day, including Bette herself, seems to hold up very well. Of course, he was never really given the big emotionally powerful roles, so we cannot actually know what he was capable of, apart from being great at playing opposite Bette Davis, who is beyond a shadow of a doubt a powerhouse in Dark Victory. Supporting them are Geraldine Fitzgerald as Anne, Betty's dearest friend, and Humphrey Bogart as Michael, Judith's horse trainer, who also has quite a crush on her. Both are excellent and substantially add to the film. Also appearing is future President Ronald Reagan as Judith's party pal Alec. He is drunk and fun in most of his scenes, and it's the most I've ever liked him. Casey Robinson's adaptation of the play by George Brewer and Bertram Bloch appropriately manipulates your emotions, but still manages to pepper in some lightheartedness and transitions naturally from one to the other. And Edmund Golding again shows just exactly what to do with Bette Davis. The last few minutes of Dark Victory, as Judith's eyesight fails and knows her death is imminent, are nothing short of magnificent. Fitzgerald beautifully backs up Bette, doing some of her absolute best work. And were it not for her performance in my next film, her work in Dark Victory would take my top spot. That film is The Old Maid, again helmed by Edmund Golding and adapted by Casey Robinson, this time from a Zoe Akins play. Bette Davis and Miriam Hopkins play cousins Charlotte and Delia. When Delia is about to be married, her old flame Clem, George Brent, reappears and Charlotte consoles him, resulting in a brief relationship before Clem goes to fight for the Union Army and is killed in action. The story picks up a few years later when Charlotte has started a home for war orphans, and it is revealed that one of them, a little girl called Tina, is actually the secret daughter of Charlotte and Clem, a fact known only by the family's doctor. Delia then figures it out, and still harbouring some love for Clem, which endears her to his daughter, invites Charlotte and Tina to live with her and her children. Tina grows up calling Delia mother, and Charlotte is gradually reduced to the role of the bitter old maid aunt. It was well known at the time that Davis and Hopkins did not get along at all, and you can see it on their faces at times. Hopkins' jealousy of Davis for her success translates as Delia's jealousy of Charlotte and Clem, and Davis's contempt for Hopkins radiates from her, mirroring the bitterness that festers inside Charlotte as Delia seems to steal her daughter a piece at a time. I can't speak for anyone else, but I, for one, before I even knew about the real-life animosity between the two actresses, despised Miriam Hopkins when I saw this film for the first time. And yeah, I still do. Also, I don't think she's a very good actress. Yet somehow that helps with my enjoyment of the film. It puts me deeper into Charlotte's corner, feeling everything she was feeling along with her. Because Betty is breathtakingly good in this role. She is uncharacteristically understated, even when you can feel the most devastating heartbreak within her. Especially then, actually. Overall, I prefer Dark Victory as a film, and those last 10 minutes are Betty at her best. But I think her performance in The Old Maid is even better. More subtle, more natural, more moving. That's why Bette Davis in The Old Maid is my choice for Best Actress of 1939.
You divided my child from me. You adopted her. You even took away my legal right to her. You taught her to call you mother. Well, tonight, just tonight, she belongs to me.
My final film is Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. James Stewart stars as Jefferson Smith, who was appointed to the US Senate after the death of a sitting senator at the insistence of the children of the state's governor. The inexperienced Smith has gained respect and acclaim by organizing a group called the Boy Rangers, an organization like the Scouts where boys can learn useful skills and be active in the community. Smith is an idealist and truly believes he can do some good in the Senate. His Senate colleague Joseph Payne, played by Claude Rains, was once partners with Smith's father, and though once just as much the idealist that Smith is, he has been worn down by the system. And although he is still highly respected, he is actually now not much more than a puppet of powerful and corrupt businessman Jim Taylor, Edward Arnold. Go-to Capra leading lady Jean Arthur plays Saunders, Smith's jaded secretary, who at first is just doing what she has to get through and preferably out of the Washington scene. And she eventually comes to appreciate, respect, and even love Smith, and teaches him how to navigate the corruption which he soon sees has seeped deep into the government he has such reverence for. When Smith tries to introduce a bill to set up a national boys' camp on the site of a proposed development of Taylor's, Taylor and Payne conspire to tarnish Smith's name and remove him from office. With Saunders' help, he holds it back with an epic filibuster, fighting for the truth until it can be proved. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, like the title, hits many of the same beats as Capra's earlier triumph, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Both involve a naive, good man being manipulated and taken advantage of by corrupt men, and by sheer force of will and their own convictions, changing things for the better. Also, Jean Arthur's roles are quite similar too. Yet they are by no means the same film. Mr. Smith takes it to another level, a national level. You get the sense that this is not a man just fighting for himself, but for the soul of a nation, which is possibly even more poignant now than it was in 1939 for many democracies across the globe. Frank Capra expertly pulls at the heartstrings while simultaneously stimulating the thirst for justice. And Sidney Buckman's screenplay, based on The Gentleman from Montana, an unpublished story by Louis R. Foster, is one of the most stirring, compelling pieces of work in film history. The speeches made in the filibuster alone are some of the best writing I have ever seen in any film, and they are only enhanced by Jimmy Stewart's exquisite delivery and commitment to the role.
There's no place out there for graft, or greed, or lies, or compromise with human liberties. And if that's what the grown-ups have done with this world that was given to them, then we better get those boys' camps started fast and see what the kids can do.
Alongside Stewart, we also have a stellar supporting cast. The Capra-Jean Arthur combination is always a winner. Claude Rains, as Senator Payne, somehow manages to keep you believing that he will come good in the end, no matter how despicably he behaves. And it is so incredibly satisfying when he does. And I also must mention Thomas Mitchell as drunk, jaded reporter Diz Moore. Also somewhat of a Capra regular, Mitchell provides a good amount of the levity in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, despite having a fairly small role. However, I think this is Jimmy Stewart's magnum opus. I mean, he's generally damn good in anything, but this time he's next level. For me, it even edges out Robert Donat's magnificent Oscar-winning turn as Mr. Chips. That's why it's James Stewart as Best Actor, along with Best Screenplay for Sidney Buckman, based on Lewis R. Foster's story, Best Director for Frank Capra, and Best Picture of Hollywood's Greatest Year, 1939. Join me next time on A Century of Cinema, when I will be discussing my favourite films of 1940. Now go watch a movie.